Good evening, everybody, and welcome to almost our very last CCLR corner for the 21-22 school year. So as you can see tonight, we're going to be focusing on a very rare conversation, very rare topic that we refer to as expiration. Many of you know this as a gap year, figuring out if this is right for you. So before we get into that, just want to go over some housekeeping items with you. First and foremost, I am Mr. Cook. I'm the coordinator of college and career counseling services here for the school district of Osceola County, also known as your friendly neighborhood CCC, and we'll get into that at the very end. So I want to welcome my Osceola peeps. Typically my Broward peeps are on here, and anybody else who may be on here from our state or nationwide. So with no further ado, let's get into these housekeeping tips. Number one, I want to encourage y'all, the way that you got in tonight is the same way that you can see our CCLR corners for the entire year. If you'll scan this QR code right here, it'll take you to the school district of Osceola County's website, and on there you'll find all types of information for college and career life readiness. But specifically, I want to point out our corners that we do. The first semester we did every Tuesday and Wednesday, and through the second semester we've done them on Wednesday. So if you're new tonight and you didn't know that this is what we do, or you're jumped on just for the month of April, I want to point out that we have CCLR corners that date all the way back to September. So you can scan the QR code, it'll take you to the website, and all you have to do is select the topic. The reason why I say that is because we record all these sessions. So just because you couldn't make it on one night doesn't mean that you can't go back and see those topics. So you can either pick the topic based on which ones are of interest to you by selecting it here on the flyer, or you can come down here. I just gave you a second option where you can expand the session recordings, and it'll look very similar to this with the topic and the date, and you can just select the topic that you would want to hear from. So there were Q&A that went on throughout the presentations. There was Q&A that went on at the end of presentations, so you'll be able to see that as well as the presentation itself. So I want to let you know that that is a resource there, and it's a common question. Is this session going to be recorded? Can I come back to it? Absolutely, we record all of these sessions. Next, I also want to encourage you, I mentioned this, there's Q&A. So if you have questions during this session, then please type them in the Q&A box. It's up in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. Very easy to see if you're on a computer or a laptop, a bit more difficult if you're on your cell phones. There should be an ellipses, which is 3 dots that you can open up and expand and get into the chat and stuff. But there's a little thinking bubble with the Q&A sign under it. That's going to be your Q&A. So feel free to ask any questions throughout. I'll be on here to answer said questions. It stays private, so really we can have that conversation. Nobody sees that, but if I think it's a question that's fairly common, or you're comfortable with me sharing it, then I'll push it out to the live event Q&A section where I just posted. We'll be starting promptly at 6. It'll show up there. So we can have that private combo, and if we feel comfortable, then I'll throw it out into the public so that they can see it. Because if you're asking a question, more than likely somebody else has the same question. So I just kind of filter those out throughout tonight's presentation. And as always, at the very end of this, if we have extra time, which we should tonight, I'll be here for live Q&A. So as we're getting to the end of our CCLR corners, if you have questions that are outside of tonight's presentation that deal with college and career life readiness, I'll be here to field those as well. Also want to point out that we do have live closed captioning. If you'll click the CC logo at the bottom right of your screen, if you're hearing impaired, I want to encourage you to use this. Or if you're on here and you are more comfortable with a different language, tonight's presentation will be offered in closed caption for Arabic, English, French, Haitian Creole, Portuguese, and Spanish. So if you want to follow along in your native tongue, you can also use that CC logo so that you can get that closed captioning and be able to follow along. Now, let's kind of get into tonight a little bit. If you don't know by now, we do have a little phrase that we use to describe our post-secondary opportunities after you leave our K-12 system. here in the school district of Osceola County, we refer to it as the SDOC 4E. I know in Broward it's the 4Es. That's where I took it from. My counterpart down there, Miss Lopez, she kind of came up with it, and I said, I'm jacking your stuff. And she co-signed, retweeted on that. So I got it. And here it is. So after a student graduates, they have the option to enroll in a 4-year, 2-year technical vocational college, enlist in the military, seek employment upon graduation. And really, we're not just talking about, going to work in retail or fast food, which, if that's what you end up doing, then cool. But really what we want you to do is be a part of our career and technical educational pathways in our high schools, because through that, you'll earn certifications, which will put you in a position where you could leave our K-12 system upon graduation and jump into a job where you're going to be making a bit more money because you have those certifications. So that's really what we're talking about with employment, but we kind of capture it all. So if you got a job set up after you graduate, then kudos to you. We're here for that, because I always say, graduating high school and sitting at home on your mama's couch eating hot Cheetos or some blue Takis, that ain't gonna work. That's not how we gonna get down, all right? So that brings us to tonight's topic that we refer to as expiration. This is an intentional gap year. We don't talk about it a lot here in the US. Our European brothers and sisters have the infrastructure and do a fantabulous job with this. So we have set out to make sure that we are working with organizations that will make this available to you. So we really, really want to explore this tonight, because it's an often forgotten topic of conversation, or a misused topic of conversation. So we're going to go ahead and get into this. I'm going to pass it off to one of our college and career counselors here in Osceola County, Ms. Kendall Bass, who's over at Osceola High School. She's going to get into talking to you about what this is. And as I said, I'll be here in the background, ready to answer any questions that you may have. So feel free to shoot them out at me, all right? So with no further ado, let's hop on into this thing.
Good evening, Osceola County seniors. My name is Ms. Bass, and I am the College and Career Specialist at Osceola High School. And this evening in CCLR Corner, we are going to be discussing a gap year. So the first thing we're going to do is take a look at our agenda for the evening. We're going to define what a gap year is, reasons to take a gap year, some gap year experiences, planning a gap year, and the challenges of a gap year. I'll also be talking with you about some resources if you want to do some research on your own about a gap year. So let's talk about what a gap year is. A gap year is the year between high school and college, where students can engage in various educational or developmental activities. And sometimes this means traveling, sometimes this means saving up some money, sometimes this means maybe working in the career field you are going to choose to pursue in college. And this can mean things like internships and externships, where the student will actually work in the field to sort of see if that's what they want to pursue a degree in. Oftentimes when we think of a gap year, we do think of travel. Students can pursue traveling around the world or around the country domestically, where they can grow in maturity and be better prepared for life in college. So life is a journey, not a destination. So I pulled this quote because I wanted you to think about what it means to really go to college, and why oftentimes people do take gap years. In my office, I tend to have a couple of types of visitors. One, they already know exactly what they want to major in, and those people are very lucky, but those are very few. Most of the seniors I encounter haven't really thought about it. And so when we think about this quote, I want to add to this quote as well. I want you to think about filling in this quote in your mind. As long as I am blank, I am happy. So for me, as long as I am serving children, I am happy. Mm-hmm. So when you think about that, you need to think personally and professionally, what are some things that you would like to pursue that would help you fill in that quote, as long as I am blank, I am happy. Remember, life is a journey, not a destination. There's no set end point. And remember, the choices and the plans that you make now can certainly be altered. Just make a choice, okay? So when we're talking about exploration and gap years, some students decide to pursue that time off to explore, to become a little bit mature, to become wiser about the world. Some choose to do that in pursuing, as I said previously, experience in that career field. For example, if you are desiring to become or be a part of the healthcare industry, you may intern at a nurse's office or a local doctor's office for a few months over the summer or the entire year to see if that's something you really are interested in pursuing a degree in. You may also decide that you would like to pursue real estate and work underneath a real estate agent to gain better experience and knowledge about that career field to see what it really requires of you. Okay, some people play sports and they participate in cultural exchanges. It doesn't have to be one thing or the other, but the idea is the journey and not the destination. You may not end up back in college, but most likely you will, because you'll realize that you're now grown and matured and you have a little experience and you're better suited to make those choices that you may not be able to make right now. So why take a gap year? Lots of reasons, actually, and some people do it to explore these interests. And we all know that student loan debt is an ever-present thing in all of our minds, especially if we're pursuing college. And we know that there are scholarships, and we know that we have grants available.
Oh, hold on. Having some technical difficulties. Let me see if I can get Miss Bass back. Okay, hold on, everybody. My apologies. Let me see what's going on here. Let's see what's up.
Good evening, Osceola. Matured and you have a little experience and you're better suited to make those choices that you may not be able to make right now.
Yeah, let's pick up from here.
So why take a gap year? Lots of reasons, actually, and some people do it to explore these interests. And we all know that student loan debt is an ever-present thing in all of our minds, especially if we're pursuing college. And we know that there are scholarships, and we know that we have grants available, and we know that ultimately we may have to take out some loans. And some students decide that they would like to take a gap year to pursue or to explore the interests that they have chosen in a career field. Some people want to find a purpose. So exploring those interests and then finding a purpose based on that. You may find that serving others is something that ultimately becomes very important to you. And through internships or volunteering activities throughout this gap year. And you may decide that that's what you would like to pursue in a degree field. You can also learn a little bit more about yourself. How do you learn? How accountable are you with your scheduling? Are you able to successfully schedule yourself, in work and in volunteer activities and whatever it is you pursue? And how well do you work with others? Maybe that's something that you'll learn about yourself during that gap year. Meaningful life experiences goes without saying. When you take a gap year and you pursue these interests, whether you succeed or fail, it's going to be a meaningful life experience for you, because ultimately you're going to learn about yourself and you're going to learn what works for you and what doesn't work for you. And that can help guide you in your future collegiate career. And also sometimes you need a break from academics. And I see this a lot with seniors, the burnout of 13 years of school, and it reaches an epitome sort of at the senior year. And what I do have to caution you about, and we'll talk about more in the challenges, is you'll get very used to not having academics and almost too used to it. And the likelihood that you don't go back might be greater if you don't just pursue college right after high school. So some experiences that are most common are traveling, volunteer work, and then work itself. Traveling, most people don't have time to travel in college unless they join a program that allows them to do so, an exchange program or something along those lines. And some people want to travel without those strings. So they will save up money and plan a few trips a year, and in that time be able to explore other horizons in travel. You learn a lot about yourself by seeing other people's way of life, and you gain valuable perspective that way. In terms of volunteering, you can also travel and volunteer. You can volunteer in places where you are traveling, or you can volunteer right at home. There are several worthy organizations in Osceola County that I'm sure some of you have already worked with that could use your help for a year's time. And during that time, you might decide that serving others, like I said, it is the right path for you. Working in general, you might start working for, like I said, a real estate agency, and you had this dream of being a realtor, and after assisting an actual realtor in, buying and selling homes and staging homes and cleaning up homes to be staged for future buyers, you might decide that that's not something you want to pursue, or you might ultimately say, wow, I love the activity. I love not being at a desk every day. I like that everything's changing, and I like being able to help people find their dream home. That might be something that appeals to you. So all three of those are very valuable gap year experiences. So steps to a successful gap year. You need to determine your goals and your outcomes. It is a cautionary tale that you take a gap year and attempt or decide to not really pursue anything. Maybe you continue the work you're doing currently, but you don't grow out of that comfort zone. The idea of a gap year is truthfully to come out of your comfort zone and understand who you are as a person, and that will help you align with that statement I told you earlier. As long as I am blank, I will be happy, or I am happy. Make a list of ideas and places, ideas in terms of things that you might have in mind. So once you're thinking of these goals and these outcomes, so if ultimately the goal is to raise money, that's a pretty simple goal, but you may need to work multiple jobs to do that, which obviously leads to the skill of responsible calendaring and ensuring that you are on time to these workplaces, and ensuring that as much money as you can possibly save in that time is happening. If your goal ultimately is to travel and gain world perspective, travel costs money as well. So you may need to work out how that travel is going to be paid. So that's where this roadmap comes in. You need to create a roadmap of what 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, and 12 months, ideally 1 full year from the date you graduated high school, from that point, so where you are. So, and have a list of goals and outcomes for each one. So if it is raising money for traveling or having one trip every 3 months, you may need to make sure that you have those goals, and then smaller goals in between so that your other bills can be paid. Or if it's learning that's ultimately your goal, maybe a certificate or a certification from a smaller program is ideally what you want to do. And you need to create a roadmap for that. Challenge yourself. There is no learning in comfort zones. Challenge yourself. Make sure that you are seeking outside experiences to help you grow. This is what will teach you about yourself, and it's going to be uncomfortable, right? So some things to consider, like I said before, are finances and college planning. So if ultimately you know that you need college for whatever it is you're going to pursue, you will need to stay up to date, as you are this year, on admissions deadlines and what kind of transcripts they're requesting, and other deadlines that you know you're going to need. Yes, you absolutely can take the SAT after high school and the ACT after high school. Many people do. Maybe during that time, you have adequate time to study for those tests. Maybe in high school, you just didn't have the time. Okay, so you absolutely can plan for those things and take those exams. Now, what I will what I will tell you is that those exams will cost you money. So that's part of the finances of that year. And then journaling and reflecting. So at each goal point, so if it is 3, 6, 9, and 12 months, at each goal point, am I any closer to attending college? Have I gotten into college, or am I on the right path to going to college at that point? These are things that you need to be able to set for yourself, and that's where you have to be responsible in setting your calendar and marking important dates and significant dates and making sure that you are up to date on new admissions requirements if college is ultimately the end goal for you. Challenges. So the first one, again, it comes back to finances, is that gap years can be expensive. Gap years can be very expensive, especially if you are attempting to travel. Travel is expensive, and as I said before, you may want to travel once every 3 months, once every 6 months. You may have one massive trip planned for 1 month where you are seeking to stay in one other country or one other area for one entire month. Finances are going to be very important for you. You're going to need to know how you're going to get that money, and travel comes with a lot of expenses that people don't really plan for, okay, like insurance, travel insurance. So the next thing is you might lose academic momentum. So I mentioned this earlier, but students that tend to want that academic break to decrease their own burnout, and sometimes it really is a personal decision to take that academic break, you might lose academic momentum. What I mean by that is you might get so used to the idea of not having any assignments due and not having any exams and not having any academic pressure on you that you might never go back. And statistically, many students don't go back after 1 year. Some people do, but really it comes out of the privilege of being able to go back. And I think about some examples of celebrities, including the Obama girls. Both took a gap year, and both of them ultimately did end up back in school. But remember, the Obamas have access to those resources, probably someone to help their child get back into college, or at least keep updated on admissions and standardized testing and things that would be required of them after that gap year is over. So just understand that this would all fall on you, and you may lose that academic momentum, and then having to pick back up and start up over again will be all on you, and it may be challenging. So we want to encourage you to look at all of that before you ultimately decide to take a gap year. And then finally, you could be a year behind in your education. So I know ultimately the path that you take may lead you away from education and then back to education eventually, but ultimately you could end up being a year behind in education. And so several people that will tell you if they took a year off in between, they're behind what they would consider their cohort of peers, maybe in academia or whatever career field they chose. And ultimately they regret it. Now, some don't at all. Some say that they, earned this year. This year was a period of great growth and maturity, and they were able to raise money. And then some ultimately feel like they were a year behind in their education. So ultimately you have to make the choice that is right for you. As promised, here are some resources for exploring and researching gap years. So you have the Gap Year Association website and the Gap Year Association approved programs. So let me tell you a little bit about that. Several colleges and universities have sanctioned gap year programs where they quite literally keep tabs on you during this gap year, and ultimately they assist you in this gap year and with various resources and keeping on track of your academic or your future academics in terms of your college, and they sort of allow you to tether yourself to them so that you don't lose that aforementioned education year or academic momentum. And so I would highly suggest you explore these resources before you ultimately decide to take a gap year, because these are wonderful colleges that allow you, again, to sort of tie yourself to them in this year of exploration and learning. And I want to just reiterate that no one is trying to talk you out of a gap year if ultimately you decide in your heart of hearts that that is what is important to you, to take this year, to gain a little bit of momentum financially or growth-wise or personally, then ultimately that's a decision that you must make. But understand that there are some challenges that come with that. But these colleges, these list of colleges through this association can ultimately help you make the right decision for you. All right, that is it for me. Again, I'm Miss Bass, the College and Career Specialist at Osceola High School. Go Cowboys! And I want to welcome any questions that you may have about gap years in the chat. And thank you so much for having me, and have a great week. Go Cowboys!
So while you're considering questions, I just want to leave this here up on the screen for you. There's a couple of things. One, I need some help. If you could scan this QR code and answer the survey, it's literally a handful of questions. This just helps us construct these presentations to fit your needs and to be better for you. Because in our mind we think it's good, but y'all are really the people that we're trying to get to. So we want to hear that feedback from y'all so that we know how to make these be the best presentations for you. So if you could scan that and answer those questions for me, would greatly appreciate it. It will ultimately help me help you. And then secondly, up here, this is the same QR code that I had at the beginning. So if you're looking for a website where you can find resources on enrolling, enlisting, employment, expiration, the gap year, financial aid, scholarships, our college and career platforms that we may use within our district, this is going to be the place to do that. Broward and mine are very similar, same content. The layout may be a little bit different, so feel free. And then lastly, if you don't follow me on social media, not that I'm fishing for followers, this is about resources for y'all. So Instagram is where the party is, but I am on all platforms. But on our social media here, we do our Monday check-ins where we keep you up to date on what's going on in the college and career life readiness world. We do our Spotlight Fridays where we spotlight student success and achievements as well as scholarships. There's What Do You Want to Know Wednesdays, every first Wednesday of the month. It's just live Q&A, me and you. We can get down at it, questions that you may have for me, questions that I may have for you. And as always, you can DM me here. Here in Osceola County, we do our monthly incentives for seniors to get their acceptances in one of those 4 E's and show that evidence to their college and career counselor. All year, we've been doing $50 Amazon gift cards. There's about 10 of them up for grabs each month. Every now and then I throw in some $100 ones and some laptops. So this is kind of where you stay up to date on college and career life readiness stuff. My whole goal is to make sure that y'all can't say I didn't know. I want to make sure that I put everything out there at your fingertips so that you will know. So I'm going to encourage you to follow me on Instagram. And then lastly, or on any platform, but Instagram is the main one. If you're in Osceola County and you're a senior, I just want to throw out that about a month ago, we announced our Osceola County initiative. It's called Osceola Prosper. So essentially, if you are a senior in Osceola County and you graduate from a public-private charter school, homeschool here in Osceola County, the county will pay for your college. You can either do a traditional AA, or you can do a more compacted program. That's the accelerated skills training at Valencia, or you can go for a certification program, which is also a compacted program at OTEC. So with those last two, anywhere between 6 months to a year and a half, if you'll just put in that time, you can jump out making anywhere between 37 to 86,000, depending on the program that you go into. So we know finances can be a barrier, especially after the pandemic, and we wanted to remove those barriers so the county set aside money to be able to do this. So one, you got to apply to Valencia or OTEC, and two, you got to get your FAFSA done. FAFSA tells us what kind of money you may need. You may get the full amount from FAFSA, so you ain't even gonna need no money because that's going to be $68.95, or you may get partial Pell Grant from FAFSA, and the county will cover that cost, whatever is in between what you are getting for financial aid and what needs to be covered so that you can go to school for free. And you have 5 years to get the programs done. You don't have to finish right off the bat. You can take a couple of classes, get your feet wet, and take your time with it. So there's a lot that you can do with this. Just want to make sure that we promote this as we near the end of your senior year. This help is available to you at your high schools from your college and career counselor, but more specifically, your transition coaches that are at your schools. Now, this is probably one of our shorter presentations. I do want to point out a couple of things that Ms. Bass said. We call it a gap year, but she was very clear that it's an intentional gap year. Yes, you put in 13 years of school, especially these last 2 years with the pandemic. It has just put a bit of wear and tear on everybody, a bit of exhaustion. But like I said at the beginning, an option is not just taking a year off, sitting at home on your mama's couch, eating hot Cheetos and some blue Takis. You want to have some intention behind this. And there's organizations that we work with that we can connect you with. Ms. Bass shared a couple of those organizations. In fact, let me go back to, oh man, I can't do it. I'd have to pull her stuff up, but I will tell you one, I'll drop in the chat that we work with extensively. I actually have a few students in our district that are taking advantage of this, and they also honor FAFSA, virtual education. You can go overseas. They cover part of the cost of this for you because it can be pretty expensive to do this, but we have a couple of students that are going overseas for a few months and just immersing themselves in some cultures, learning language, learning about other cultures, but their plan is to come back and either enroll in a 2-year, 4-year technical college, enlist in the military, or seek employment upon return. So we want you to have some intention behind this. When you take that gap off and you get out of the groove of your academics, the likelihood that you return back becomes a little bit less than if you go right after school. And just teaching at the collegiate level, I have adults that return, and I mean, life catches up really fast. You know, you graduate high school and you think you're gonna go pursue one of those 4 E's, and then you take that time, and 6, 7, 8, 9 years later, you got you a family, you got you some children, you work in a full-time job and trying to take on some college classes or pursuing one of the 4 E's without the help of like a college and career counselor or myself or the coaches at our schools, it's challenging. It's a different type of challenge. So we just want you to take some intention with it and just further explore and identify those passions and interests so that you can come back and do one of those other 3 E's. All right, let me shut up. I see that y'all have a few questions. Let me check y'all out. Yeah, so this was shared. I'm gonna go ahead and publish this so that y'all can see it. And then I'm gonna answer this one question and then I'll refer to the one that I just shared. Oh, this was a good question. I want to share this too. These are 2 really great questions. Let's start with the easier one down here. Do you still qualify for scholarships like Bright Futures if you choose a gap year? It depends on the organization that you work with. You can find those organizations on the website, which is why I share that QR code with y'all so that y'all can get there. I have a whole section devoted to exploration in the companies that we're working with. I don't know of anyone right now that honors Bright Futures, but I do know a couple that honors your FAFSA. So if you get a Pell Grant from the FAFSA, they'll take that Pell Grant to go towards the cost of taking a gap year. The only way to utilize your Bright Futures money is if you go to a 2-year or 4-year college, and you can do an overseas program, which is close to a gap year, but technically it's not because you're going to be enrolled in a 2-year or 4-year college. That's the only way that I know that you can leverage that Bright Futures money. So great question. And then the other one was, I thought that was shared with us, depending on what the student wants to do during the gap year, they may need to plan several weeks or months ahead of time. For example, if they go to work at a state park, they need to understand the employment requirements, or they need to submit applications or letters of recommendation ahead of time. Yeah, so you just, and Ms. Bass talked about that, like having a plan and making a checklist and thinking forward. We call it backwards mapping. If this is your end goal, what steps need to be taken for you to be able to get to that end goal? So you want to be mindful of that if you're going to be taking an intentional gap year. So I'm here. I'm going to stay on for at least another 5 minutes. If other questions come up, other thoughts come up, this is the last one you'll see my face on. We do have one more coming up next week, referring to college admissions, and we have one up in the air that we may do that first week of May that I'll let you know on social media. But it's tonight or next Wednesday for sure. But tonight is the last night you see my face. So if you have any other questions, I'm going to stay on to try to answer those questions for you. Right, I'm gonna stay on for a couple more minutes. 6:40 is what I'm looking at. Normally I stay until 7. Remember, you can ask any questions in reference to tonight's presentation or anything else college and career life readiness related. All right, everybody, I want to thank you so much for joining us this evening. Y'all have a good rest of the year. If anything comes up between now, really whenever, because I work year round, feel free to reach out to me through social media, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, whichever you feel most comfortable using. And I really appreciate y'all sticking with us throughout this year, and I hope that you found this beneficial for you throughout this year. We'll be looking at all that feedback and seeing how we can make this better next year, or if this is something that y'all want next year. So I'm going to go ahead and close this out. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Again, thank y'all so much for joining us tonight.